The night Seoul stopped being safe happened without any warning at all. One moment the city was alive with light and laughter, and the next, something ancient and terrible moved through its streets like a shadow swallowing everything in its path. People who had been neighbors, co-workers, and strangers on the subway became something unrecognizable, hollow-eyed, driven by hunger, tearing through everything they had once known. But inside one small apartment, none of that existed yet. A father named Young-Hwan had arranged candles on a birthday cake, and his daughter Sue was laughing, and for just a few more minutes, the world was still whole. Sue was the kind of child who made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. That evening she pressed her small hands against her cheeks and listened to her grandmother's voice crackling through the phone from the countryside, full of love and no gift to offer but love itself. After hanging up, she missed the old woman so much that the ache was almost visible on her face. When her father finally revealed her birthday present tucked beneath the sofa, she dove for it like the answer to everything she had ever wanted: a pair of headphones and 10 dance lessons. Exactly, perfectly right. She put them on and spun around the living room, and Young-Hwan watched her with that particular expression fathers carry when joy and fear live in the same heartbeat. Then Sue stopped spinning. Her eyes drifted toward the window, and what she saw made the music in her head go completely silent. The couple from next door were in the courtyard below, and at first it looked like a fight, the kind of ordinary, terrible thing that happens between people. But then the woman turned, and her face was wrong in a way that no word was built to describe, and she opened her mouth and bit into her husband's neck like she was consuming something. Sue stepped back. Young-Hwan stepped forward. And before either of them could speak, the woman looked up at the window and found them looking back at her, and she began to move toward the building with the slow, unstoppable certainty of something that no longer needed to think. What followed was chaos pressed into a very small space. The woman shattered through the window with her forehead, moving on pure hunger and no pain, and Young-Hwan used every piece of furniture he could reach to pin her back long enough for him to grab his daughter and run. But the hallway opened into something worse. The streets below were not streets anymore. They were rivers of infected bodies crashing into each other, biting and dragging and falling and rising again, and the sound of it was something that lodged itself permanently inside the chest. Sue did the only thing her terrified mind could think of. She went still, let her limbs go slack, let her face go empty, and she became one of them just long enough to buy them both a second. Young-Hwan followed her lead, and for a breath-stealing moment, the horde parted around them like water. They ran the moment they could, and Sue fell, and an elderly infected woman crawled toward her with her mouth open, and Young-Hwan threw himself between them and felt teeth close around his arm, and then he pulled it free and looked at the bite mark, and there was no blood, only the mark of a set of dentures that had come loose in the impact, and he almost laughed, almost cried, almost collapsed entirely. He told Sue to hide while he fought his way to the car. He drove through the horde with both hands gripping the wheel and his eyes straight ahead, and he went back for her the way he always went back for her, the way he would always go back for her, no matter what. But when he pulled her into the car and looked at her hands in the dim light, he saw the bite mark on her palm. A small thing. A child's bite. He told her it was nothing. He told her it couldn't possibly be enough to matter. And then the dark veins began crawling across her skin like cracks in porcelain, and she looked at him with eyes that were already changing, and then she was gone. He drove through the night to his mother Bamsun's home in the countryside, carrying his daughter in the back seat and his heart somewhere on the road behind him. Bamsun rushed in before he could stop her, found the room destroyed, found Sue moving in ways that human bodies are not supposed to move, and before she could understand what she was seeing, she raised her cane and struck her granddaughter twice, purely on instinct, and then stood there in the wreckage of what she thought she knew, weeping in a way that had no sound at all. The government's voice came through every screen and speaker in the country with the weight of a verdict. Report the infected. Do not shelter them. Do not protect them.
Concealment was now a crime.
Young-Hwan went to the hospital hoping to find something different, some version of this story that ended differently, and instead he watched a mother refuse to let go of her son and saw what the military did in response, and he drove home with the knowledge sitting in his chest like stone. He dug a hole in the yard. He said he was sorry to the girl inside the house who could no longer hear him say it. He raised the shovel. And then every single memory he had of her came at him all at once. Her laugh, her dancing, the way she said his name, and his hands stopped. He put the shovel down. He made her a promise instead, the only kind of promise that meant anything anymore. They would not be separated. Whatever happened next, it would happen to both of them together. It was the music that changed everything. Sue wandered into Bamsun's old storage shed, the place where she used to play as a small child, and when Young-Hwan found her there, he stood very still and let himself feel the fragile, impossible weight of the fact that she had found her way back to a place she loved. He played one of her favorite songs through his phone speaker, and her body responded before her mind could stop it. She began to move, not like a zombie, not like something lost, but like a girl who had once spent 10 dance lesson vouchers learning how to do exactly this. Young-Hwan watched and did not breathe and decided, quietly and completely, that he was going to bring her back. He was a trainer at a zoo. He understood what patience could do to something that had forgotten it was loved. His childhood friend Dongbei came to visit and almost reported everything he saw, and Young-Hwan stood in front of him and spoke with the terrified certainty of a man who has only one thing left to lose. He showed Dongbei the video of Sue dancing. He said, "She still has something in there. She still has memories. She still has herself." Dongbei looked at him for a long moment and then said, "I know someone in pharmaceutical research. They're close." And then he said, "I'm coming with you." They brought her to an uninhabited island where no one could be hurt and no one could report them, and they began. Sue lunged and snarled and refused everything, and they kept going. Young-Hwan observed her the way he had observed the animals he trained, not trying to force her into something she wasn't, but watching for the thing she already was, somewhere underneath. He noticed she loved the warm-up routines. He noticed she calmed when she was fed. He noticed that the hunger for biting faded when she felt something else instead. Days became weeks, and the weeks began to show something that looked remarkably like progress. She stopped lunging. She started listening. She couldn't speak yet, but her eyes followed him differently, with something that was not quite recognition but was moving toward it the way dawn moves toward morning. Then came Yunhwa, Young-Hwan's first love, arriving like a complication he hadn't prepared for. She was a teacher. She was also the woman who had personally sent her infected fiancé to his death and reported more infected individuals than anyone else in the region, and when the news cut to a report about the outbreak, she said she despised zombies more than anything in the world, and Young-Hwan sat very still and said nothing, and every second felt like standing on ice. She eventually found out the truth, the way truths always find their way out. She came to the house with fury and a bat, and when she swung it at Sue, Young-Hwan stepped into the blow without thinking twice. And Sue erupted. She lunged toward Yunhwa, and then Young-Hwan spoke to her in a low and steady voice, and she stopped. She looked at him, and she calmed herself down, and stood there with the expression of someone who was choosing not to be what she was afraid she had become. Yunhwa stared at her for a long time. Then she said, "Prove she's different. Put her in school. If she can think, she deserves a chance. Otherwise I go to the authorities tonight." Young-Hwan agreed to the gamble because he had no other door to walk through. School was not gentle. Two girls pulled at the makeup covering the dark veins on Sue's face, and her eyes rolled back in her head and they screamed and scattered. A basketball hit her full in the face during gym class, and the impact left her features temporarily rearranged, and they had to rush her to Dongbei's clinic to be put right again. But in between the disasters, something else was happening. Sue waved back at the girls who waved at her. She started to know their names. She started to know things. And in the middle of a crowded festival, surrounded by noise and color and the smell of fried dough, she tasted something that unlocked a door somewhere deep inside her, stood at the vendor's stall, walked away still chewing, and then turned to her father and said, quietly, clearly, with the voice of someone coming home, "Crispy dough." 2 words. Young-Hwan put his hands over his face and wept in the middle of the street, not caring who saw, holding his daughter and saying nothing because there was nothing adequate to say. The end arrived the way it always does, faster than expected and worse than feared. Sue's infection leaked onto social media, and her biological father appeared at Bamsun's door, a man who had taken the insurance money from his wife's death and walked away, without looking back, now arriving with greed dressed up as concern. He shoved Bamsun to the ground. He grabbed Sue to turn her in for the reward. Young-Hwan came through the door and hit him once, and then the man hit back and hit again and kept going until Young-Hwan was on the ground barely breathing. And Sue saw it. She saw what was being done to the person who had loved her when no one else would, and something fundamental inside her ignited. She bit down on the man who had never once deserved the title of father. Young-Hwan pulled her back immediately. He told her, "You must never do that. Not ever." And he looked at the man turning on the floor and understood that there was only one way this ended. The military came with the dawn. Young-Hwan barricaded the storage shed and held Sue close and told her he was sorry. He told her to bite him, that this way they could stay together, that he would become what she was and neither of them would be alone. But she kept shaking her head. She kept saying no. And when the soldiers broke through and opened fire, Young-Hwan stepped into the path of the bullet the way he had stepped in front of every terrible thing that had ever come for her, and he fell, and the shed went silent except for one sound, his daughter's voice, calling for him. Over and over, the word daddy stretched out into something endless and unbearable and utterly human. The doctors who treated him found something in his blood that no one had expected. The repeated injuries, the repeated healing, his body had built something extraordinary. Antibodies. Unnatural resistance. The very thing that might save everyone. They introduced his antigens into Sue's body, and slowly, then all at once, she began to come back. Bamsun put Young-Hwan's training journal in her granddaughter's hands when she was well enough to hold it. Every page was full of him. Photographs, observations, careful notes about what Sue liked and feared and reached for, all of it written by a man who had watched her more closely than anyone had ever watched her and loved what he saw without reservation. Sue read every word and wept beside the bed where he lay, and the tears were not only grief, they were the proof that she was fully herself again, capable of feeling everything, returned to the life he had refused to stop fighting for. She became a dancer. She stood on a stage under warm lights and moved the way she had always moved, the way she had moved even when she was lost, the way the music had always found her no matter where she went. Bamsun sat in the audience and cheered until her voice gave out. And on a screen somewhere, in a room where a man was slowly learning to use his hands again, Young-Hwan played him the video, and Young-Hwan's fingers moved. And his lips moved. And somewhere in the long quiet of everything it had cost them to get here, a father who had refused to let go found out that love, when it is stubborn enough and patient enough and willing to step in front of enough bullets, has a way of coming back to you.